So, welcome to the Actual Astronomy podcast. How are you this afternoon or this morning, I guess, this time, Shane?
I'm doing all right. And yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. So, this is kind of our solstice episode, episode 22 of the Actual Astronomy podcast, where we talk about all the weird and wonderful facets of amateur astronomy with myself, Chris, and Shane.
Yeah.
Cool. So, we had a pretty exciting thing happen last Sunday. Not only did we do episodes 20 and 21 of our podcast, you actually brought up Noctilucent Clouds. Do you want to just give a little bit of a refresher of that?
Yeah. So Noctilucent clouds are somewhat of a rare phenomena that you can observe right now during this time of the year. Part of it is you have to be at northern latitudes, like anywhere from 50 to 70 degrees, or I think southern latitudes actually within that same window. It puts you in a position to observe these things. And what they are is they're illuminated clouds that appear after the sun sets. So what will happen? You'll be able to observe these things. I think it's within 1 to 2 hours after sunset, and only this time of the year. So the sun really doesn't dip too far below the horizon, and while it's set and we can't see the sun with our own eyes, it's still illuminating really high parts of the atmosphere. And there's these very high level clouds called noctilucent clouds, once they're illuminated, that become visible at night. So the way to kind of identify that you've actually observed these things is, during twilight or astronomical twilight, a cloud in the sky will just appear black. You'll just see the silhouette. But if you see these things illuminated, then you're observing some noctilucent clouds.
And
And
they're pretty bright. Like, I
yeah,
remember hearing of them. I'd never really seen them much. I'd only seen them once during a transatlantic flight, just like basically the month before I moved out here. And then after I moved out here and saw them, I was really shocked how bright they are. So there's kind of like no confusing them once you've seen them. They're, like I say, like almost like an iridescent white, or like a neon white almost. Like, so it's not like you're never really wondering, is that them? Isn't that them? Like a typical cloud will have some gray tones to it, or like pinkish tones, like you were saying, like darker tones. And these things are just white. Okay.
yeah, they really stand out. And the other thing too, like in a way, it might be easy to miss them, especially like the ones we saw Sunday night, which were quite like they occupied a large area of the sky. Sometimes you'll only see these things skimming kind of in the northern horizon, but the ones that we saw were almost half the sky, I think. And it's easy to disregard them because in some I kind of think they look like regular clouds, like daytime clouds. But then you have to stop yourself and say, "Whoa, the sun set 2 hours ago."
Yeah.
These are not normal clouds.
Yeah. I actually think, just occurring to me off the top of my head, I think noctilucent actually means night shining, because
Okay.
would be the base word for night in Latin, I believe. But yeah, it was pretty exciting. So last week, as we went over like our week coming up and things that you might be able to observe at this time of year, or these particular weeks, I kind of had detailed out some stuff. You had actually sent me a note earlier in the week talking about noctilucent clouds. I'd forgot to include it. Unfortunately, you reminded me, because it had completely skipped my mind. And then you talked about them a bit, and I was like, oh, that's neat. I think I even made a comment, like the only time I ever see them is when you kind of bring them up. And then I went out that night, looked out my window, and boom, noctilucent clouds that night. I couldn't
Yeah.
believe it. So I sent you a text, and you're like, yep, that's them. And then
Yeah,
we,
I was surprised. Like when you sent me that text, I went outside around I think 10 p.m., which is probably about an hour and a half after sunset,
yeah, last week.
something
Yeah,
like
it
that.
was. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, within a few minutes. Yeah.
Yep. And wow, I couldn't believe it. They were just glowing, and like I said, it was a huge chunk of the sky. It was
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, they weren't in the north. Typically we've seen them in the north before. And these ones were well, really more or less all over, like sort of the western and coming in kind of thing. Yeah, they were, scattered a bit more than typical, but it was. And then you texted me that beautiful image that Alan Dyer took over just outside of Calgary.
Yeah. So here's a quick plug too for our Twitter account. If you go on Twitter and go to @actualastronomy, and just look at our retweets and likes, you'll see that I think I for sure liked it, and I might have retweeted an Alan Dyer tweet from 7 days ago. So that would be, or maybe it was the Monday actually, June 9th. And Alan Dyer, he's a great astrophotographer, great astronomer, and he captured essentially what we saw, the Noctilucent Clouds. So if for all of the listeners, if you're wondering what Chris and I are really talking about, go to our Twitter and you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, and Alan is a great astrophotographer and was a great observer when he was doing a lot of observing. And Alan and I have done lots of events together, like out in the Jasper National Park Dark Sky Preserve. So great amateur to get to know. Yeah, so that was really exciting and very unexpected. I was really happy about that because our weather for observing has really been poor. For you and I and many people out west. We have had just rockin' winds, eh?
Yeah, yesterday I think the gusts were around 90 to 100 kilometers an hour. So that's 60 miles per hour. You just can't observe with telescopes or even binoculars really in that kind of wind. So to be able to see some noctilucent clouds where you just need to look out your window, that's kind of nice. It changes things up a little bit.
And the wind here is different. So like where I'm from out east, and we have the boreal forest, or right in the forest where I'm at. You can have 40 odd kilometer-hour wind gusts, and you can go out and set your tent up, not really worry about staking it. I mean, you probably should, but as long as you're there with it while you're setting it up, it's no big deal. And you get some gusts in that around, but to be out and around in the 40 kilometer-hour winds. Not great for observing, but you can kind of, like, I've gone to lots of star parties and set up or whatever. But here in the open prairie, like, you get these, they call them like a straight wind or something like that. And boy, like 40 kilometer-hour winds is a non-starter for doing many activities outside. Like, you're not going to set up a tent or anything because you're getting that full wind just about everywhere. And that's a huge difference that I notice out here. So if it's saying it's 40, like in the Maritimes, you might get it from time to time, but it kind of has to work its way down through the trees, and there's more hills and rolls and that sort of thing. So you're typically going to have a little bit of shelter most places. But here it's just full on. You got 40, you're going to be right in 40 the majority of the time. You're not going to really be able to do much, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're planning like to go out observing, Chris, with your telescope, what is your maximum threshold of wind? Like, when do you say, nope, too windy, it'll cause too much vibration, I just not doing it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I never really thought about it much before I moved out here. And that the answer to that question is pretty clear. It's about 20 to 25. Once you get to 26, 27, it's out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So, and I mean, for other reasons too, there's a few things that occur. One is not just the wind and that's buffeting you around, and that's always unpleasant. But you can also get like a lot of dust stirred up. Like here, I mean, we've gone out and had like marginal conditions like 25 to 35, and you turn a flashlight on, you can see just the crud in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear me every once in a while. I'll mute because it does bother my asthma a bit, and was bothering it much more last week. I think things have just kind of blown around so much now that all the little particles are embedded, or unfortunately, the little pieces of the ripped off shingles and all my neighbors' houses have kind of settled down now. So, but yeah, it definitely creates a big stir in the atmosphere, and then the seeing conditions, of course, are going to be extremely poor as well. So, were you able to get out to take a look at anything on the 8th, 9th? We had Jupiter and the moon pairing up, as well as Saturn pairing up with the moon on the 9th.
No, I didn't get a chance to observe any of that. How about you? Were you able to take a look?
No, I kind of wish I'd got up on the 12th. I think the 12th might have been okay, but like I find that gets so impacted, like the sleep gets so impacted by the wind, and we have day jobs that require a lot of concentration and attention. So I've been trying to get some good sleep on the nights where it's not too windy. But like last night, it was so windy, I probably got 3 hours sleep. But I did get up yesterday morning to go out.
Oh, wow.
And I went out for 3 seconds. It was just, I wanted to get up and I really wanted to see Mars and the moon. I thought maybe if it's not too bad, I'll set up my telescope. And no, I got up. I tried to go out. I can't really say that I even saw the moon. There was, first of all, there were still lots of clouds around. So it was kind of cloudy, like a lot of big broken clouds. I could see the moon, but I just got blown right back into the house. Like it was, like you said, gusting into the 80s or 90s, just howling. And so that just wasn't happening, unfortunately. So, last week the big observation was really seeing those Noctilucent clouds. That said, though, one night I did get out with my binoculars in
Okay.
the yard. Like I think it might have been the night of the 11th. There was one night that was decent, and I got out and I did a big scan around and just looked at some, because it was just so nice to actually be looking at stars again without getting
Yep.
slammed by the wind. And that again is just such another great plug for having the binoculars, because what with it getting dark so late these nights, like it really wasn't shaping up to be a great evening. There was lots of cloud in that around, and then it had gotten dark, and I was doing some work or something, and around 10:30 or 11, I went to go to bed and just kind of looked out, went, "Ooh, it's pretty clear." So I just grabbed the binoculars and did like a 15-16 minute tour around the sky. And I had to get to bed at a reasonable hour, so I didn't want to stay up much past midnight. But yeah, I had like a little binocular session, and I looked at some of those open clusters, like up and off of Eucas, like the summer beehive, and a few objects like that. Looked up in through Cygnus. It's just nice to go out and to look at some stars. So have you had your binoculars out at all, Shane? You've got some pretty interesting binocular sets there.
Yeah. No, I probably should have. I was just doing some naked eye in the backyard a couple nights when I would take the dog out to use the facilities before we went to bed. And Cygnus and Lyra are just perfectly positioned right now for
Yeah.
some nice binocular observing in the backyard, or even telescopic if the conditions present themselves. Because they're at a reasonable placement in the sky early enough that it's a nice session.
Yeah. So hopefully once we get through this last, hopefully it's like the last stormy weather we have for a while over the next 5 or 6 days. Hopefully as it starts to get dark again towards the end of the month and beginning of next month, we'll get back to it. That'd be awesome. So this week we have a few events coming up. Unless there was anything else you happen to see last week of interest.
No, that's all I have to report.
Yeah. So June 17th. Day is that? Is that Sunday, Monday? That's
Today's Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday. So that's going to be Wednesday morning. Uranus is going to be 4 degrees north of the moon. I'm thinking, I don't know. I think the sky's going to be too bright to see these kind of things. On the 18th, we've got the moon near the Pleiades. Again, you probably have to be much further south than we are to see that, because I think we're really only getting like a few hours of anything remotely dark. And then the 19th, we have the moon, Venus, and Aldebaran in the morning sky. The 20th is the solstice. Do you have any big solstice celebrations planned?
No. Do
No.
you do anything for it?
I never.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
I know some people do. There's a buddy of mine. He's a kind of a weather nut, and he likes to get together to have a little celebration. I'm not sure why, but each to their own.
Yeah. Yeah. I spent a summer in England doing archaeology, and went to some stone circles and that sort of thing. And yeah, if you can make it out to Stonehenge, I always thought that would be kind of cool. But on the 21st, there's that annual solar eclipse visible from parts of Africa and southern Pakistan, northern India, and China. So you and I aren't going to see any of that, but maybe there's people out there. I see we have more and more listeners every day, so there could be people out there that are within range. And if that's the case, definitely suggest finding some people with the experience and proper equipment to safely view and to view with. Looking at the sun can cause you to go blind, so be super careful with that. I wouldn't go out and start experimenting anything to do with solar observing without some good experience. Like I never looked at the sun, would never have looked at the sun if I didn't get involved in an amateur astronomy club and kind of see how it's done safely with other people. So that would be cool though to see the solar eclipse. New moon is on the 21st. Of course, you really can't see a new moon. That's just when it's darkened out. So yeah, so hopefully we can get out a bit and see some of these planets. I really would like to start observing Mars a little bit in the morning sky because it's now greater than 10 arc minutes. So I'd be excited to take a look at that for sure. That would be pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. There's a few comets too that maybe I'll mention.
Oh,
that
really?
people have a shot at.
Okay.
One is what is it here? Comet C 2019 U6, and I think it's just known as Comet Lemon. Two M's, I think. That must have been the discoverer.
I think it's
Go
Mount Lemmon
ahead.
Observatory, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
one of the robotic ones. I could be completely wrong, and I could be insulting a gentleman named Lemon out there, but that would be coincidental.
Yeah, fair enough. So it's at magnitude 6.4, which is actually
Oh
pretty
wow!
bright, and
Yeah.
it's bright. It's getting brighter. The problem for us in the northern hemisphere is it's in sextants, so it's quite low. At sunset, we won't be able to see it in kind of where we live at 50 degrees, probably until around June 26th.
Okay.
But if you're in the southern hemisphere or further south than we are, you probably can take a run at that one, see if you can find it.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Uh,
6.4, like so that people know, like that's not something you can really see with your unaided eye. You need binoculars, but that definitely is in the range of virtually any binocular from anywhere that's remotely dark. Like you want to be out of a city, but anywhere out of a city should be able to get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Next one is Comet C 2020 F8. It's currently magnitude around 7.4, but this one's fading. And it's low in the sky in Auriga until about the mid-month. So
Yeah.
right about now, I guess.
So that's getting down there too, because that's in the western sky now. So
Yeah, that'll be a lot more challenging, especially in June.
I think that was probably a little on the faint side where it is to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last one that I'll mention here is Comet C 2017 T2, discovered by Pan-STARRS,
Ooh.
and it's currently magnitude 8.2. So again, this one is faint. You'll definitely need binoculars or a telescope. This one is fading a bit, and it's traveling from Ursa Major into what is it here? Canis Vena. Yeah, there you
So,
go.
so that's kind of higher. And although this one's a little bit fainter, like another magnitude fainter, this would be more like a telescopic object, and that would definitely be visible through like anything like a 6-inch or larger telescope would pull that in handily from like any location that's reasonably dark at all. Like from a dark site, you could probably get that with a good size little telescope, like an 80 or 100 millimeter telescope, should be able to bring that in from a dark site.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. I'm not too sure if any of these comets have like long illustrious tails or anything like that. Just to give the listeners an idea of what you can see with a comet. Sometimes you'll see the bright ball with a tail, and then the length of that tail can vary quite a bit. And sometimes there's even some unique characteristics or detail within the tail. But sometimes these comets just appear as a single point of light, but it's kind of a fuzzy ball. You'll see stars in the field that are sharp points of light, but then you'll see this fuzzy thing that you can't focus into a sharp point of light, and sometimes that's the comet. I'm saying that just to set some expectations that if you decide to hunt these things down, they may not look like some comets that have been on the covers of magazines and things like that.
Yeah, and the really neat thing about comets, and you've kind of mentioned it already, but to me anyway, is first of all they move, so you can actually see them moving, and they move very slowly. So I think sometimes people get like meteors that come streaking in and are visible for just like a split second, and comets confused. But comets are these large, much harder hunks of rock and ice that are out there in our solar system, that come in towards the sun, and then parts of them start to uh, melt off in the way that maybe fog would form over a lake, and then that trails out behind them. But they're very hard. I mean, one of the companies that I worked for in the past was Said Systems, and we worked on the Rosetta mission, and it was found out through that exploration of that comet. I always want to say it's Chelyabinsk, but it's not. It is a Russian name though. And it kind of like bounced off. Like the lander was never able to kind of hook on properly to the comet because it was much harder than it was thought. But it's neat that they come in and you can see them moving amongst the stars, and then you can see this material coming off them. So they're changing, and they're changing in brightness as well. So you kind of get to see three different things. So typically, when you look at anything in the nighttime sky, whether it's a star cluster or a galaxy or a nebula, typically you're really not seeing much in the way of change. It's pretty much in the same position every night. I mean, there's some variable nebulae, but boy, like the changes and all that are going to be pretty subtle. Whereas a comet from night to night, you're going to see it make its progress amongst the stars. We had a really bright one a few years ago that moved so fast you could actually see it moving amongst the stars live in real time. And then the other thing is you're going to see that brightness change over a period of time. You might see a tail form. You might see a couple tails form. And it's just fascinating to see such change actually taking place in the nighttime sky as you're out there.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe while we're on this topic of comets and things that kind of move in the sky, there's a few asteroids too that are somewhat observable. They're favorable in terms of their closeness and brightness to Earth. One is 7 Iris, another is 2 Pallas, and then probably one of the more famous ones is Sirius. They're all favorable to observe, and if you get your star charts out and find the field, the way to really confirm an observation of an asteroid is to observe it one night, do a little sketch of where you think it is amongst the star field, and then come back the next night or a couple nights later and see if it has moved within that field. And they're kind of fun to look at.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've looked at a few asteroids over the years, and sometimes you'll get them. I think Pallas or Sirius, or maybe both of them, get to naked eye visibility every once in a while. And when they do, I typically do try to track them down from a dark sky, because I think they hover around like 5th or 6th magnitude or something like that. So you need a pretty good dark sky to see them. But through a telescope or binoculars, no problem getting them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I've been to the Pan-STARRS telescope that finds a lot of these comets.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
Where is it located?
It's located on Haleakala in Hawaii, and maybe I should say this first. You need to make arrangements to get in there. This is not open to the public. It's available to professional astronomers, and maybe those of us who would have liked to be professional astronomers, but have some connections in the scientific community. So when I was going to Hawaii a few years back, I made a lot of emails and phone calls, and was able to observe not next to Pan-STARRS, but sort of just maybe about 100 feet over from it, but inside. Like there's what they call the astronomy village up there, and it's gated and has like I don't know, like there's people that protect it there from the U.S. Naval Observatory. So this is nothing you go and mess around with without making prior arrangements. So they told me to show up at this particular time, and they were so adamant that I be there at whatever time it was, 3:00 in the afternoon. So like you're committing a significant piece of your holiday to do this as well. And I know that's difficult for people. If they're going to Hawaii, not everybody's going to want to basically take a couple days out of their vacation to go and do astronomy. And it's really unnecessary if you're just looking to stargaze. Haleakala is beautiful to observe anywhere from. But I kind of want to go to the astronomy village up there. And then, they were saying, show up at 3 or 3:30, whatever it was, but don't be early. And I was like, okay, like whatever. But I got up there, and I know you've been to Haleakala as well, and my phone wasn't working the best. And the car was, and you're at 10 or 11,000 foot altitude, and your brain's not working great. And I'm like, and I can see where I'm going. And I got up there early. I could see, I did a bit of a walk around. I could see where I needed to go. And I thought, well, it's probably going to take me 5 minutes to drive there or whatever. And anyway, I misjudged. I end up there like maybe 4 or 5 minutes early. And I was like, I'll just sit. There's nobody around. I'll just sit here. And so I'm sitting there, and then like, of course, somebody comes over from the Naval Observatory, and they're kind of like, yeah, you can't be here. Like, started giving me a hard time, just as the person I was there to meet showed up. And they gave that person kind of a hard time, I think. Yeah, it takes a little bit of arranging to get up there. But we went through the gate, and then you drive up and around. They're doing a lot of construction up there too. Yeah, and just as you're going up the little hill, that's where the Pan-STARRS telescope is. You go around the corner, and they were building a new solar telescope at the time. And then yeah, so it was kind of neat. Another neat thing happened. So I was staying where a lot of the technicians stay, sort of up on the mountain, but I was staying at 2,000 or 3,000 feet altitude so that I'd be somewhat acclimated. And my nephew had built some radio transmitters. He works for a company that builds these giant radio transmitters, and they had shipped them down there. And the tech who was doing the installation was staying in the same place. And when he told me what he was doing, I gave him a quick rundown of the machinery that he was installing. And he just was so freaked out that I knew what he was doing there.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it was a small world, really, when it comes to this. But yeah, it's kind of neat. So
yeah,
it's fun. So I finally ordered a mount. I think I was telling you about this.
Yes. I'm excited to hear about this.
So I'm getting the Skywatcher AZ GTI, which is a little LTAS mount. It's relatively affordable, and it will track as well as allow LTAS motions, which that's how I like to observe. This is opposed to an equatorial mount. And I just want to be able to stick the telescope on and track planets and view planets without having to continually adjust the telescope, because I like to do some sketching, and I have been finding it pretty challenging to kind of move the telescope and sketch, especially once you get to high power there. So you've lent me this 5mm eyepiece, and I'm really eager to try that out. So I was going to order a 5mm eyepiece, but I think I'll try yours out first, and then you were saying you might even sell it anyway, so I might just borrow it for a bit, and then figure out what I want to get, and then maybe order one, or get my own, or buy one from you, or something. Who knows what I'll do, right? So
yeah. I want to ask you a question about that mount, Chris. So, with any of these tracking mounts, whether it's equatorial or not, you usually have to do some kind of an alignment. So you set it up, an equatorial mount, you'll make sure it's aligned for the North Star. And then you usually point it at a couple of bright stars and say, okay, you're now looking at, pick a star, and then away it goes. With this Skywatcher, can you just point it at a planet, turn it on, and will it track the planet, or do you have to go through any kind of an alignment procedure?
My understanding is you do need to do one of those 2 star alignments. I don't know that much about electronic mounts, and I believe this is like a go-to, and I believe you have to use like your Sky Safari software, which I have on my Pixel book. So yeah, we'll see. I have a few unanswered questions, but generally it receives very positive reviews. It's a very light and versatile mount. I like the fact that it is LTAS. That's my preferred mode of observing, just because it's just easier to observe in LTAS than using equatorial mounts, in my opinion. And it can hold my Takahashi 100mm. So I'm excited about that. And that's sort of about good weight load for it. My Takahashi LTAS mount is almost over mounting the 100mm. I feel anyway. That 100mm just only weighs 5 pounds, or just a hair. I think I'm to 5.3 pounds the way I have it set up now. And I usually put about 13 pounds on my TAC LTAS. So, but the TAC LTAS won't track, and I just want to be able to sketch and view the planets for an extended period of time here from my yard or driveway or whatever. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, tracking mounts certainly are nice when you're, particularly with the planets, because the planets do move through your field of view quite quickly.
Especially
but also
power,
yeah, especially at high power. So if you want to do any sort of critical observing with some high magnification, it's pretty challenging without a tracking mount. Now, it certainly can be done, But it depends a little bit on the quality of the mount too, because you may get a little bit of vibration coming through every time you nudge the telescope, which is quite frequent at high magnifications.
Yeah.
But another option is some of these manual mounts come with slow motion controls. Those help a little bit to track, but really nothing beats some electronics and some motors to just take all of that hassle out and just have the mount follow the sky basically.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like the TAC Lapidus LTAS that I have is wonderful, and if I wasn't trying to sketch, I think I would just be happy with it. I'd probably try to adjust it. I think you can adjust it for a slightly lighter load, and I think that would be perfect. However, with the eyepieces and the high power, once you get up into, like, I'm trying to use 150 power here, or 180 power even, and that's a lot of motion. Like, you're constantly trying to keep it centered. If you're just viewing though, and you're not trying to sketch, it's no problem. I would almost prefer to do it that way. But with the sketching, like, you're trying to hold the clipboard and your pencil and a light, and then you're looking through the telescope. And I was doing that with Venus this spring, and it was just, yeah, it wasn't as much fun as I think it could be. And I looked at getting an equatorial. I know you've got a pretty nice equatorial there, Shane, but that was my original intent, was to get a Vixen equatorial or something like that. But I just have no intention of doing any kind of astrophotography or other things. And I've always observed LTAS, so I thought, hey, this is really great. It's about a quarter of the cost, I think, as a decent equatorial. So save a bit of money there. And, I think as well, this one will work better with lighter telescopes. So I have some pretty small telescopes, 80 millimeters and 60 millimeters, and the 100 millimeter are all really small and lightweight telescopes. And I have a mount that's really good for the 60 millimeter, but and it's my travel mount, but it's definitely over mounted once I get much beyond that. That's the Microstar, or the Dwarf Star Deluxe, from Universal, which I don't think they make anymore. But yeah, I had another thought with mounts, but anyway,
Yeah.
that's the story of the mount.
Yeah, fair. You mentioned that I have an equatorial mount, and I totally agree with you on the Alt-Az mounts. They're more intuitive. I think they're easier to use. And I probably would not own an equatorial mount if it wasn't for two factors. One is I have that little observatory in the backyard, so I can just leave it set up, which I do, which means I don't have to do the polar alignment every
Right.
time.
Yeah.
If I had to do that, I wouldn't own it. It would be too much of a pain. I just wouldn't use it. But the other reason why I wanted an equatorial mount is I wanted one with good setting circles. So on each of the axes of the telescope, there's a little ring with a bunch of numbers, and they're known as setting circles. And they, when they're calibrated, they basically are tools that you can use to find just about any object in the sky. Just like a map for travel, there's latitude and longitude. Well, there's a whole bunch of different coordinates that you can use for things in the sky. So you look up the coordinates in your planetarium software or in your star charts, or atlases, I should say. And then you can essentially use these setting circles to point the telescope at a spot in the sky where the object is, look through the eyepiece, and it should be there. So I like that for a couple of reasons in the city. One, it's just with the light pollution, sometimes it's a little more challenging to star hop. So having this aid just helps you find things a little bit quicker. The other thing is when I had I had a Celestron AVX mount, which comes with a little digital hand controller where you would punch in like the NGC number or whatever catalog, and then the mount would find it for you. The problem with those handheld controllers is if the temperature gets below probably 5 degrees Celsius, they just kind of lock up, like the display locks up, it freezes, and they're just not usable. Whereas setting circles, it's just two pieces of metal. So they work at any temperature. And, where you and I live in the wintertime, that can easily be negative 30 degrees Celsius. And, electronic digital displays just don't perform in that type of weather. I know some people put on little warmers on the back, but just to me that's a pain. So those are the reasons why I have this equatorial. But I totally agree in terms of ease of use, and Alt-Az is ideal, especially like, in the city where you might even have to pick up the tripod and telescope and everything and move it throughout the course of the night. And Alt-Az is just simpler to do that with.
Yeah. The one thing I did read, and that's great because I was going to ask why would you go with these setting circles. It's neat that you're doing that because that's super old school. Like
Yeah.
I haven't really seen people do that in the past many years, but it's so practical, right? Like everybody really gets focused on all the digital technologies and having the latest software and whatever. But every object has its right ascension, declination coordinates. And yeah, you can just dial that in on the spools manually, and then you don't have to worry about LCDs freezing or other electronics to go dead or to be damaged by the cold or other outdoor conditions. One thing I did read about the AZ GTI is there was somebody, I think in North Dakota or somewhere, not too far from here, and they were observing with it in the winter and having no problems. They were really enjoying it. So
Awesome.
I was sort of happy to hear that. Probably in the winter, I probably would just go with the Lapides because it's all metal construction anyway. And this, I think, has significant plastic components. But I can still observe the planets, and I'm just going to take it out, set it down, line it up, go in and get warm, and then come out and I'll probably just be observing either that planet or another planet. I'm not really going to do much other observing with it other than just that. So I hope it serves the purpose well. But I did get something else. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it. I did buy an 80 millimeter telescope with it.
What? So tell us about this telescope.
Yeah, it was basically almost like a giveaway with it. So yeah, it was just it was just literally another few dollars. And I thought, I'll just get it and see. We'll see what it's like when I get it. And I don't know, maybe I'll just sell it, or I teach my thinking. I have a lot of different thinking of what I might do with it. So I thought I would get it and just try it out and see what it's all about. So I didn't really even think about it that much. It also gets me to the free shipping. You were talking about getting free shipping earlier, so it was going to be. Oh, I think I saved $5 by doing it that way, basically. So I don't think it cost me anything extra. But you've actually ordered something that I'm really excited about, and you've ordered a new chair, like an observing chair.
Yeah. So when a lot of people think about astronomy and and the gear that you need, a chair is probably not even on the list, especially when you're starting off. But let me tell you, there is nothing that I enjoy more while observing than a good observing chair. Um, I'm 6'3", so to be hunched over looking through a telescope sometimes causes my back to get a little fatigued. And there's been times where it actually ends my observing a little bit early because I'm sick of kind of being hunched over.
Yeah.
But if you really want to observe an object like you do when you do your sketching,
Yeah.
if you really want to try to pull out detail and spend some time with one object, part of doing that effectively is to be comfortable at the eyepiece, and you just can't beat sitting down.
Yeah.
So many years ago, I made my own observing chair. It's known as a Denver observer's chair. If you Google that, there's all sorts of free plans on the internet that tell you exactly how to build it.
Named after John Denver.
Yeah, right. One of the keys with most observing chairs is you have to have an adjustable seat height. Because the telescope eyepiece, whether it's a Dobsonian or a refractor, it can vary quite a bit depending on the object you're looking at. So the Denver Observer's Chair works okay, but it only goes up. I think the seat height on mine is only 23 inches high, which is fine for a lot of applications. But in fact, if you're using a Dobsonian, it's probably great for just about anything you do there. But with a refractor, if you have the tripod fully extended to create some distance between the refractor and the ground warmth, 23 inches of seat height isn't enough. So I've wanted a higher chair for a while. And recently I did some research and I settled on the Burlap Chiron chair. So it goes up to 93 inches. So that's a plus. It has a padded seat cushion, which is a huge luxurious upgrade over my plywood Denver observer's chair. It has a very wide back, so it'll just be a little more comfortable to lean back and get some back support that way. But probably the thing I like most about this is how it folds up when you're not using it for transport. It's folds up basically to like two what looks like maybe 3/8 sheets of plywood, about so 6/8, or what would that be, 3/4 of an inch thick, which is really phenomenal. So it'll pack into almost nothing. It'll be easy to transport, and it should be ultra comfortable.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this because I would like to get one as well. I might get like a next one down, kind of smaller one. But yeah, like I'll tell you, the one thing, if people are just getting in, or even if they've been doing astronomy for a while, is the business of the chairs. Like, and I think there's two chairs that you need. I have an observing chair as well, and a friend built that for me. And again, like it's just sort of lived out its life. Like it's at the end of its life. And so I just need a new chair. I haven't used it in a couple of years. It's just, it's just starting to fall apart and it's getting kind of old. And so it's just time to get a new one. And that friend is no longer in a position to make another chair, and lives 3,000 kilometers away from me. So yeah, I've been looking at a new observing chair as well. But then the other is to have like a really good lawn chair, like a reclining lawn chair. And I've bought them from LL Bean in the past. I know other people have bought different ones, but I think having a lawn chair or a camping chair that will recline is just amazing. Like I have that chair, it's pretty low. So we were talking about getting out of the wind. Like I find like my chair, I think I'm only about 8 or 9 inches off the ground when I set that up. And I had a really windy night. A few years ago, I went down to do some observing by myself in the grasslands. It was extremely windy, and put that down by my tire and got my car oriented just right, and just did a binocular session, for a couple hours. And it was great. Was able to do some sketching and just awesome. And I know like when we go out and do our astronomy, we spend a lot of time sitting in those chairs, and it's great to have a rest, look up at the stars and drink some water, have a snack, and then kind of get back up. It's hard to be on your feet all night, eh?
It is, yeah. A chair is really important. So it's worth doing a little bit of research and getting yourself a nice one, because you'll actually spend a lot of time in it while observing.
Well, yeah, and like I was thinking about, sort of back to the observing chair. We were having, I think it was last July, and you and I are having this great session with your Teleview Genesis, which is a 100 millimeter refractor. And this is what really convinced me that I needed a 100 millimeter refractor. Although some people might argue, one thing I don't need is another telescope in this house. But it's such a beautiful telescope. Your mount's working great. But it ended up like I had that list of objects we were working through, and it was at the most awkward height for those objects, just coincidentally. And I think that was the night that kind of put you over the edge to actually buy an observing chair, if I recall correctly.
100%, because that was the night my back was conking out. And one of our observing friends, Rick Huziak, he has I think it's it's a replica, or maybe it's the actual cat's eye perch, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Cat's eye makes a bunch of collimators, but they make chairs as well. So he asked if I wanted to borrow his chair. And it's one of these really high backed chairs. I don't know how high it goes, but oh my gosh, like the comfort. And then it really extended that session. I was about to go to bed, and I think we stayed up for another couple of hours after that.
Yeah, and it's too bad. Like we always say, like these really good nights are precious. Like it takes a lot of effort for us to get out there. It's a long way. We get the gear. We try not to spend that much money on it, but we're just going through a point right now where we are each buying some new equipment. Often we go for years without buying new equipment, but you have made an investment in the gear, and then you get out and you've got all these great plans, and then it just really is unfortunate when the plans get scuttled by something like a chair, right? And as expensive as these are, they're really not that expensive compared to anything else. I think we're talking about like a medium, decent quality eyepiece expenditure which can double the length of your observing session. So I think without a chair, you're probably limiting yourself to a couple hours at that telescope, eh?
Yeah, for sure. And if you're somewhat handy and you have a couple of basic tools, some saws and some screwdrivers, if you just search for observing chair plans on the internet,
Yeah, there's
there's a
all.
whole bunch of different styles and projects that you can take on yourself and build it for probably less than $100, and maybe even less if you have some scrap lumber in your garage or something like that.
Yeah, that's how mine was made. Is I had to buy. I bought like a little camping, it's not a camping stool, it's called like a workshop stool, and it had a really nice seat and cushion. And then my buddy took, it's something like, it's a little bit larger than a 2x4. And then he took an old flagpole and bent it in a vise and just sort of cobbled it together with other bits and pieces. And it worked great. But it's a little unsteady. And again, like I find with the sketching, like I'm doing something pretty specific. And so I'm trying to get set up just uh, to do something so specific as sketching. So if you're not trying to do something like that, and I think most people should try to sketch at least a bit. I think it's a worthwhile adventure. But you can get by without such things pretty easily. You can build your own, and it would be more than enough just to have something that gives your posture a break, or even just to change position is actually what I like most of all. So yeah, so I think that's really all I have to say about episode 22.
Yeah, that's all I have too. I think we
Great.
covered a lot of good topics.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for listening, and we will stop the recording right now.